icebreaker. So generally, and your situation is a little bit different because it's one-on-one. When I'm teaching, obviously I have 15, 20 students. Their stress level is going to be high. And their stress level is what we call the affective filter. So our purpose is to lower the stress level. If the stress level is low, the production will be high. So when you first meet a student, and I'm sure you've done this also in your own lives, it's some form of icebreaker. And if you look at page 3, it talks a little bit about themselves. Some of your students, whatever they are, graduate students, doesn't matter, doesn't mean that their English skills match their education skills. A lot of times their education skill is here, but they have fossilized problems that they want you to fix. So when you create or have some form of icebreaker, you want to make sure the questions help the student, that they have enough background knowledge that they can speak. Often students will need to write before they speak. And the reason that they need to write before they speak is to give them a little bit of structure and a little bit of organization. Without the structure, when they try and speak, they'll have a lot, usually, of paralanguage. Like, because they don't know what to do. So an icebreaker will help them with the structure and lower the paralanguage. But 2 things. You need to consider their linguistic background. So you need to make sure that you know about the grammar. And for some of you, you know grammar, but you don't know the rules and how to explain it. So for example, you ready? I'm going to put you on the spot now. So when we use simple present, I brush my teeth, I eat breakfast, that would be what a beginner is doing. So if I say, I have eaten breakfast this morning, that's present perfect. That's what an intermediate level student would be doing. An advanced level student would be, I had eaten breakfast before I came to school. That's past perfect. So you kind of have to know the grammar, that when you're speaking, that you are speaking at the right level to the student and the grammar is not going to confuse them. So whatever you're creating, whatever you're doing, you need to think about the grammar with the vocabulary. I'm not asking you or telling you to dumb it down. I'm telling you to choose the vocabulary that helps the student understand. So Mr. HP, if he tries to explain something to me, he's going to go, she knows nothing. So he has to choose the vocabulary that helps me to understand whatever he's trying to describe. And the third part is content. So one of these questions will say, find someone who has a tattoo. Okay, who has a tattoo in Japan? Not that many people, right? And so you make sure the content, the vocabulary, and the grammar match the audience that you are teaching, right? Otherwise, they're not going to be able to produce the language. And as I'm going over this, at any time while you're eating your sandwiches, if you want to ask me a question, just please feel free to interrupt. Yes, I can tell that. I can tell my 5th grade teacher was right there.
Okay, so when you have a beginning speaker, would you suggest that you only work with the present on them and not even present the present perfect or the past perfect?
Correct. Because they don't know what it is. They have no idea what it is. And when you say it to them, they can't answer the question because they don't understand the question.
Okay.
So in technical terms, we call it, I'm not going to go too technical, it's called I plus I. So I is what they know. So if you do past perfect, that's I plus 10. So much more that they can't produce. So you're always trying to do I plus 1, a little bit more.
But aren't they coming to us from another country with the grammar in, no?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. And for most of you, you said you had Asian students.
Yeah.
So in Asian students, do you think they have an active classroom or a passive classroom?
Passive.
So really passive classroom. So that's like me today, talk, talk, talk. There's no student's going to interrupt me. So it's a passive classroom. They can fill in the blanks forever, but they cannot transfer that skill into writing and into speaking. So that's the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now on page 7, it talks about teacher talk. So if you're in one of my classes, class is 50 minutes, you're going to hear me talk for maybe 7 minutes. The rest of the time, the students are talking. If you talk too much, what are they doing? Right? They're not learning. They'll do this. And what does this mean?
I don't understand.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're saying, but I'm just being polite. So you have to teach them how to interact. And so the worst question you can ask a student is, do you understand? Because of course they're going to go like this. So you have to ask them to rephrase, to retell it so that you clearly can see that they understand. I spend my life asking basically 2 questions. Really? Why? How? That's all I do. And then they have to produce the language after I've created the activity. For most Americans, I'm English, but it doesn't matter. For most of us, we're afraid of silence. So if there's silence, you just keep going. You've got to give the opportunity for the student to process, understand, and produce, and not just keep talking. So it's okay to be quiet. Let them produce the language. So limit your teacher talk. Okay, so on page 9, you have to figure out what your students need, why they want you, and what are their learning styles. Because not every student learns in the same way. Most students are visual learners, right? Most of us are visual learners. We need to see pictures, we need something to, we call it activating schema, to help us to write or help us to speak. So on page 9, it's just, and you don't have to use these are just ideas. So you could find out how your student learns. I study hard using textbooks every day. I prefer to talk to Americans. So then you can see how much they actually do, and then that's going to help you to guide you on what you need to help that student. If you ask a student, for example, what part of English do you want to improve? They will say, usually, everything, or I'm not sure, because they expect you to know. Some of you are doing conversation with the Korean lady. Some of them want writing. I'm going to get to writing in a minute. When you do writing, you must be really careful that it doesn't become your writing, and that we're going to learn how to do direct feedback and indirect feedback. Direct feedback is you're correcting everything, and they're just going, So we have to learn that they produce it. I have graduate students that come to me that cannot really speak, and their writing is perfect, because they totally copied or somebody wrote it for them. And then they can't produce it in the classroom. So you're not really helping anybody if you do it like that. So find out how they learn, find out strengths and weaknesses, and that's going to help you to produce whatever it is that you're doing in your class. Okay. So writing. So that's the first lesson plan on page 11. So again, as I said, this is a little bit more structured than you are probably going to be doing, but it will show you what we do in a classroom when we're actually teaching students. So anybody who's done any type of teaching, you know that you have to have some form of framework. If you don't have a framework, you don't know what you're doing, and the students don't know what they're doing. So when we do a writing lesson plan, we would have 6 activities. So the writing lesson plan in front of you is for an academic program. These students would be intermediate levels. So an intermediate level student can produce a short paragraph. So in a paragraph, okay, help me out. When you write a paragraph, what are the 3 parts of a paragraph?
Beginning, middle, end.
True, but we have different words that we use for that beginning, middle, and end. Topic sentence, supporting sentences, and concluding sentence. And a topic sentence has 2 parts. What are the 2 parts to a topic sentence? Main idea and a controlling idea. Is a topic sentence objective or subjective? It's objective. Supporting sentences are objective and subjective. So these are the things that you need to know to help them so that they can create it without you. So that's an intermediate level student. They should know that basic framework. So on page 11, these are lesson plans that were created by students in my TEFL program that want to be teachers. So it gives you the objectives, and you can obviously look at this more later. On page 12 and 13, you have the directions for the teacher. So the directions for the teacher are for you so that you can actually use this when you are in the classroom or when you're tutoring. So you'll see it's called a pre-activity, during activities, and a post-activity. It's kind of like a sandwich: bread, meat, bread. You need to have all three parts to create a good framework. So these students, we're going to be asking to produce a paragraph about their best friend. You cannot expect your students to produce that paragraph unless you teach them how to do it. So the first thing, if we turn to page 14, is to give them the background, to activate their schema. So if you guys are helping with writing, the first thing is, okay, what are they writing? What's the prompt? What's the question? And the first thing that you need to do is brainstorming, right? And so here's a brainstorming activity. So they're drawing a picture of their best friends. They're coming up with adjectives to describe it, their outside appearance, and their personality. And then they have to explain it to their partner. So they're using critical thinking skills, then they're using speaking and listening. If you're teaching writing, after they know what they're going to be writing about, you need to do a grammar point or a vocabulary point. Because most students have, again, most of you have Asian students, they have a passive vocabulary. So when they were in their countries, they had to memorize banks and banks of vocabulary words for a test. After they took the test, what happened to the words? Bye-bye words. And so when they write, they use the same words again and again. Or they use a dictionary and they're choosing words that you and I would never use and go, what does that word mean? But they don't know how to use the vocabulary. So you have to teach them vocabulary. I spend my life giving examples and simple definitions so that they can actually use it. So the way we teach vocabulary, you will see it on page 15. So this is intermediate level, as I said. So there are 7 new words that you want the students to learn. And these 7 new words are in a context. So the students should be able to guess the word from the context. But again, the student's just going to nod their head. So there has to be a check. And the check is a multiple choice at the bottom so that they can clearly understand the vocabulary. After that, now we're kind of ready to work. So we have to, okay, I'm doing what I do, you just have to think how you modify it in your world. So I have to teach them, I have to show them what this paragraph looks like. So I have to do a teacher-centered activity. And that would be on page 16. So that's the paragraph, that's what the students should be producing after I've taught them, they've practiced, and they do it by themselves. So page 16 is the model. I go over the topic sentence, main idea, controlling idea, supporting sentences, concluding sentence. Now they can practice. I don't care what level they are. I don't care what degree they have in their country. It doesn't make any difference. You have to teach them how to write in English. Because is writing in Korean, Japanese, Chinese the same as English? No. Korean, for example, the main idea is at the bottom. So when you talk to your Korean student, she's going to spend 15 minutes getting to the main point, because she will always put the main point at the end. So you have to know how do they learn in their first language to help them learn in English, because it's not the same. So it might look really easy for you, because this is how you write. It's not easy for them. Most Asian students have been taught to memorize a template and fill in the blanks. They can't explain it, they don't know why, but they can follow a template. So you've got to be able to show them how to do it, because they need to critically think and use that information. So you teach and model it. There's a guided activity on page 17 to check that they understood what happened on page 16. And then now they're guided, now they're ready, and then on page 18, now they would write their own paragraph. After they've written a paragraph, or an essay, what do most of your students do you think? Do you think they check it? Yeah, most of them don't check it. If they do check it, they check it right then. And if you check it right then, do you see the mistakes? No. So you've got to teach them to wait and then to check. So on page 19 is a peer review or a self-review. And this review would help them to make sure that they have all those points in that we teach. Now, you are not going to be doing all of this because to create this takes hours. But what you need to do is you need to show them, let them practice, and then they should do it. And that's for everything, whether it's reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So in the packet, there are going to be example lesson plans for everything, for reading, writing, listening, speaking, as well as talking a little bit about business. Okay, I'm doing this, what I'm doing right now is what takes 27 hours. I just did it in 10 minutes. So that's a writing lesson plan. Now, if you look on page 21, this is correction symbols. So when we teach writing, we will always have symbols. And symbols are indirect correction. This is pulled directly from a book. I don't use these symbols, I have my own symbols. So you have two ways, direct and indirect.
These are pretty standard editing symbols.
Yeah, so you can use these, it does whatever you want. If you do direct feedback, so direct feedback is, I have the ads, that's what I'm standing over here. Nicky, drink coffee. Okay, so we have a mistake. So direct feedback would be, no, that's wrong. Drinks. And the student will go, and then the next time, they make the same mistake again. So indirect feedback, so these are my symbols. Above the word drink, it's a verb problem. So it's a T. So that they know that there is a problem with the verb and that they have to go in and correct it. Because otherwise they're not going to learn. You have two, can I say one more thing and then ask me a question? So the other thing that you need to figure out is the difference between a mistake and an error. A mistake is what they know, and so why would people make mistakes? Maybe they forget it, maybe they don't check. Those are why they make mistakes. An error, they don't know, right? They have no idea. So with an error, you need to teach it. With a mistake, you use symbols. And so when we get to grammar, you've got to figure out, okay, what level are they, right? And then what grammar point goes at what level, so you know the difference between a mistake and an error. Yes?
Tense. T stands for tense.
T tense. So this is what, those are my symbols. I don't know what they use in here.
I see.
So whatever symbols, I just use simple symbols. So whatever symbols you want. And then you have to make sure that you, and this is hard, that you don't overcorrect. So most Asian students want you to decode everything and correct everything. You correct the big problems. You think that professor is really reading? You know how much time they spend reading essays? 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes. I see him do it and I'm like, really? He read it and he got a B+? I have no idea what you're trying to say. Because it doesn't make any sense. But the professor's just, oh yeah, fine. Some, not all. So make sure you go in and know the mistakes and the errors. So some type of symbols. Authentic language. An authentic language is language that happens really outside. I was testing a student yesterday, oral test. Every other word was like. So the good thing was that he knew that's what people use, but he had no idea how often he used it until we recorded it, played it back to him, and you're like, oh my God, I'm really sorry. So we want to bring in authentic language. A lot of authentic language you can use from the websites that I gave you. TED Talks is a really good, useful resource because you can filter. So you can filter length, you can filter topic, and it has the script. If you're using TED Talk to help your students to listen, script or no script?
No script.
Thank you. It's not really, I know, most people, that's the right answer. Because if they have the script, what are they doing? Reading. They're not listening. So there should be no script. They just have to listen. How long do you think you could listen to something in Chinese?
10 minutes.
Really? Really?
3 minutes.
Right. So maybe maybe 3 minutes. Really? You can listen, but you'd be switching off. So maybe 3 minutes. So don't make it so long because there's no way that they can concentrate for that period of time. So you're trying to help them to be a better language learner. That's what you're trying to do. And that's why you need to break it up. So bringing authentic language is good, but also using the textbooks that they need for their classes as well.
Can I just
Yes.
ask a question about the authentic language and television? If they're using the television to listen and try to understand, what do you suggest on television? What?
Good question. The problem with TV, I would prefer movies and TV, because the problem with TVs is there's there's two, laugh track, clapping. I don't care what show it is, there's tons of sexual innuendos. It's very, very fast. Vocabulary and idioms.
Well, what about like children, like Sesame Street, stuff like that? Is that degrading because it's for children, or?
No, I don't. I mean, if it's a low-level student, for me, it's all about the level of the student rather than the material. So I use Jack Johnson. It's the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycling. It's a children's song, but I use it at my intermediate level class because the topic is great, the speed is good. There's no difficult vocabulary. So songs are good. Movies are good because for me, I'm going to pick clips and then I'm going to do it through the clips. But a TV show is really hard.
Yeah, I know.
If they're high level, Modern Family is good because there's no clapping, there's no laughing, and they often look into the camera.
Okay.
The problem is lack of background knowledge, sarcasm, tone,
Right.
and different stories. So it's really hard to find material that they can actually listen to and understand. If they say the news, I'm like, really? Really? BBC is kind of slow. The local paper, local news, too fast, and I don't even know what they're talking about. CNN, too fast. Right? But the BBC on Channel 15, they are pretty slow.
Right.
And easier to understand.
And they short clips too.
And they have short clips, and they need to be exposed to different types of English. Because when they go to Vons, do they talk like you? I don't think so. And that's where they're going to use the language. So they've got to be exposed to different types of language. Okay, conversation. So when we do conversation, you might need some conversation ideas. So you always got to choose the material that's relevant to the student and has purpose for the student. So on page 25, and at the bottom you will see it says TEFLpedia. Good website, it's got lots and lots of topics. So I just printed all the conversation questions. So for example, if you look at the first one where it says arts, and then it lists all those different things, those are all different topics. So you can click on one and there's lots of different questions. Again, kind of what I said at the beginning, you can't just print it because the vocabulary or the grammar might be too high for your student. So you might have to modify it, but you can go in and copy and paste. Modify it so it will work for the students. But there's lots and lots of topics. I know this might sound stupid, but don't choose a topic because you're interested in it, because they might not be interested in it. I had a lovely gentleman and he was only interested in vintage cars. And every lesson plan he created was about vintage cars. Nobody cared about his vintage cars. So he totally failed in the classroom because he didn't think about the audience. So think about the audience. So there's lots of questions there that you can use for a fluency-based activity. So fluency is making sure that they can comprehend and keep going. So a lesson plan for speaking starts on page 29. Now, most of you, if you are helping your students with speaking, do you think you're focusing on fluency or accuracy? Accuracy, are you helping them with grammar and vocabulary? Or just content? The ideas?
I did grammar, I don't know if that's wrong.
No, that's good, it's good.
Yeah.
You need to do both, right? You need to have both, accuracy and fluency. But it goes back to the same thing. Are you correcting a mistake or is it an error? And if it's an error and you corrected it, then they don't know how to do it.
Right.
And then when you correct grammar, when they're speaking, how did you correct it? Can you remember? Or go ahead.
I usually write it down And I don't like to interrupt, and then we talk about it.
That's okay, but imagine if you're doing Chinese, and as you're speaking, you see me write down.
Oh, I'm much cooler than that.
Oh, you like this? So from a language point of view, it's okay to interrupt, because if you, and it depends on your student, but I'm always going to interrupt, because if you wait too long, they're not going to remember what they did, even though you wrote it down. There was no context, and he or she probably did this. Did they repeat it? Did they make the same mistake again? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Yeah, so sometimes they end up just repeating. It's okay to interrupt. Yes?
I only did conversation, if that's what they wanted. So if it's conversation, I corrected it immediately, and I usually gave them 1 or 2 or 3 synonyms, similar words, because that seemed to make it easier for them to.
Yeah, that's great. And as long as the words that have with a similar meaning are at the right level, they're okay. And the same thing, when we're in conversation class, we will do indirect feedback. So they want you to do direct feedback because it's one-on-one. But indirect feedback, I'm only correcting mistakes. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So in my class, I'm going, sorry, really? Are you sure? That's how I'm doing it. Or I will repeat the mistake. And when I repeat the mistake, they will hear it, and then they'll self-correct it themselves. So that's indirect feedback, rather than direct feedback. So when I tutor, I do both, right? I do both. But I have to teach it if I know it's an error, and then I'm sorry, really? And then it seems to be easier. So when you're helping them with conversation, you still kind of need some type of framework. It's very similar to our writing framework. So on page 29 through to page 33 are the directions for the teacher. So you can look at this later. And then I want to start on page 35. This is a lesson plan for a high intermediate student in a business class. So these are all true. These are all true. So if you look at these pictures, so I really like picture number 2. So this is a true invention. So the bag has mold on it, so nobody will steal. Thank you. So nobody will steal it from the fridge because it looks like a bad sandwich. So and these are all true. So the umbrella in Japan, as they roll around in Japan. So they will have 4 pictures. Again, activating the schema to help them. Then questions at the bottom, and positive, negative. These are open-ended questions. So an open-ended question encourages the students to speak. If it says, which one do you like? They will just go, that one. End of conversation. So when you're making the questions, make sure they're open-ended, and it could be describe, identify, explain, illustrate. Those words will produce more language. After we've done that, again, we have to have vocabulary. So these are vocabulary for business. So some of these on page 37 are more idiomatic expressions that they will never have seen before. You put in the context, and then there's multiple choice. Because when they actually speak, they have to use the vocabulary. If they don't use the vocabulary, you didn't teach them anything. And they're never going to get better, and they're going to stay at the same level. After you've done the vocabulary, again, you have a check. And the check would be on page 39. And then on page 41, we have to show them how to speak, right? How to speak in this different situation. So you have different types of register. You have a formal register, you have an informal register. So students have to know when to use the formal register, when to use an informal register. What about tone? All those types of things. So here, you will see at the top of 41, because we're in a scripted role play, you've got expressions for the seller, the customer, and it shows them how the words are used in a real situation. If you don't model it, how are they going to do it? So they need to have some form of model. So some type of script, and you can find this online, right? They had to create this from scratch. But you can find different scripts online. So after you show them how to use it, they then have to practice. So on page 43 is the practice. So this is seeing that they can use the vocabulary that you taught them, that they know the topic is about inventions, and they know the phrases. So the activity on page 43 is they have to create their own invention. So you would give them a stack of pictures, so they created a heel umbrella. So you have an umbrella, you have a pair of heels, and now I can go outside in the rain and my shoes will never get wet. And they have to do function, price, and how to use it. Remember, it's a business class, right? So it's marketing, it's advertising. They have to be able to use these. After they've done that, then they would have, on page 47, a fluency-based activity. And the fluency-based activity is to make sure, so we've had accuracy and fluency, this is just fluency, coming up with the ideas. So here you're not going to do much grammar correction, because if you do too much grammar correction, then the amount of language will reduce. So this is where you're doing things like why, how, because. So again, limit the teacher talk, extend the student talk. Like you don't have to say very much, you just have to say those keywords. And then what we always do is we do it's called a post activity, and it's to personalize what they've just done. So this is a true story. So they had robot teachers in Korea to teach pronunciation. So this is a $25,000 robot. So they have to read the show. This is true. So they have to read it, and then they have to respond. Do they think this robot is a good idea, or is it a bad idea? Is it helpful, or is it not helpful? So you're being able to integrate all of the skills to help the student. Right? So that's how we would use with a framework with speaking. Now, I'm just going to go a little bit fast now, because you'll see there's another one on page 53. There is a listening lesson plan. And at the bottom of page 53, you'll see that these people use TED Talks and try something new for 30 days. When you go onto TED Talks and you filter, there's thousands of millions. You're going to spend hours. The way I just look at the ones with the most views, right? That's the one that I'm going to choose. And so the first thing that I do is I look with the most views. I listen to the first 15 seconds to see if it grabs me. I want to listen to the speed of the voice, the tone of the voice, the vocabulary. If all those three things are okay in the first 30 seconds, then I'm going to listen to the next 3 minutes. And then I can decide if I can use it in the classroom. So this one, you can use these lesson plans. This one is a really, really good one because it's talking about dreams, talking about change. It's clearly got transition words, first, second, third, so that they can see, hear the different points. So this is one for listening. So again, you've got the directions on page 53 to 57. And then from pages, this is higher level 2, this is high intermediate to low advanced. And then you have the activities that start on page 58 and go through to page 66. The big difference between what I did with speaking and writing is with reading and listening, we have 2 types of activities. And these 2 types of activities are called top-down activities and bottom-up activities. So if you turn now in your packet to page 81, so this explains it very simply. But a bottom-up activity is either listening for details or reading for details. And top-down is either listening or reading for the main idea. Okay, I'm going to give a big generalization right now. So for Asian students, do you think they are better at bottom-up or top-down? So details or big picture? Details, right? So they are much more detailed because when they learn English in their countries, they decode everything. There's the subject, there's the verb, there's the object. And so they can find details. They have to fill in the blanks all the time. They have to do vocabulary all of the time. If you ask them the summary, what happened in the reading or the listening, or you ask them their opinion, very, very difficult. 2 reasons. They're not taught top-down enough activities and very little critical thinking skills, right? They listen to the teacher, Whatever the teacher says must be right. So those are the two biggest skills that they need to work on. So when you look at the reading lesson plan and the listening lesson plan, you will see activities that focus on details and top-down. So a bottom-up activity is detail. So it might be a true-false activity. It might be a multiple-choice activity. A top-down activity might be sequencing. It's when you have sequencing is you cut the story into strips, and then the students have to put the story into the correct order. And that shows that they have full comprehension. So if I'm working with an Asian student, I'm going to concentrate on top-down activities because that's their weakness. If I'm working with my Arab students, I'm working with my South Americans, it's the opposite, right? So they can tell you what happened, but they can't tell you what time class starts. So you've got to know the audience to know that you have to work on their weakness, not their strength. And that's in reading and listening classes. So there's 2 lesson plans in there to help you, right? And that gives you a little bit of background. Page 83, grammar. Okay, so you use grammar, but do you know why you use it? Do you know how to explain it? So on page 83, it breaks down the verb tenses. So it breaks down simple present, simple past, the future, the continuous, the perfect, and the past perfect continuous. So that will show you how it's done. And then you really need to do a test. And the test is on page 85. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you do a test now. But I'm going to ask you a question. So if you look at the first one, so just anybody's. Tell me how would you fill in that blank? You look really great. So at the fitness center recently, so you put the verb, you've got to make a question. So what's the question?
Have you been working?
So have you been working out at the fitness? So what verb tense is that?
Past. Achieve.
Present perfect progressive, right? Present perfect, yeah, really? Yeah, I wouldn't lie to you. Present perfect progressive. So if a student says to you, oh, present perfect progressive, how do I use that? You would say,
I don't know.
at least we have honesty. Okay, so present perfect progressive, just for you, is an action. It started in the past, goes to right now, and probably will continue. Because the key word there is recently. So it started in the past, happening right now, and it will continue.
Isn't going for me, it's going that's making it progressive.
It's have you been
going to the gym?
Have you been working out?
Or have you been working? In other words, working would be it, or
But
going.
you have to use what's in the brackets.
Oh, okay.
See? Top down reader. If you look at the second one, just the first one, what accident occurred? What are you going to put in there?
What did you do?
Right, what did you do when the accident occurred? What's the verb tense? So I'm only going to do 2 and then I'm stopping.
Simple past?
Simple, very good young man. Simple past. So why are you using simple past?
Action occurred in the past and it stopped.
Perfect, perfect. So simple past, started, stopped, finished in the past. It's over. So really what you need to do is do this verb tense, figure out what they are on page 83, then you can go online and figure out how do you explain it. Because when you're explaining, I'm sure you're saying it and the student's just going, okay, okay, but they're never going to be able to use it if you can't explain why and how to use it. So that's a little bit for you for grammar. So to help you, help. Okay, on page 89, at the top, it says English page. So you will see, this is a tutorial that you can use, but also you can give it to your students. And it has all the answers as well. So it has it for everything. So it will explain to you, okay, simple present and present continuous. When do I use that? When do I use present continuous? So again, it's to help you. So I have to do it. If I don't do it and somebody asks me a question in class, my stress level is going to be high. I could say I don't know, which is fine. I can get back to you, but you really should know the basic parts. And for most Americans, that's the hardest part. You can use it, but you don't know why. Okay. So that's some verb tenses. Pronunciation.
Is it going to be possible to even explain that to the people that you're tutoring?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Give you the short answer, yes. So we teach, from beginners, and so when we're teaching beginners, we're only teaching simple present. There's lots of visuals. I like teaching 5th grade. I drink coffee, and it's showing it and explaining it, and it's more drill based at the lower levels. But if we don't do it, then how are they ever going to move up?
But I mean to explain it and use the correct terms, which I've forgotten since grade school, and so I need to be tutored, but.
No problem. Yeah, but you're only going to pick, okay, how often do you guys use past perfect? I had eaten breakfast before I came to school. Right, never, right? But you need to, if you're teaching writing, they need to use it. But if you're teaching speaking, they don't really need to use it. Same with if. If I were rich, I would not be here. There's 3 different types of conditionals. Do you know the 3 different types of, yeah. There's all of that thing that, taking a grammar class is helpful. It's not boring, it's helpful. And it will also help you with the students. Pronunciation. So when you correct pronunciation, you probably, I don't know, you've got to know, where does the tongue go? Where's the teeth going? All these different types of intricacies that you need to help them. I'm not going to go into that. But here is something about reductions. So if you look at the top on page 91, number 1, this is an exercise. So gotta, wanna, has to, gonna, oughta, have to. This is what they want, but when they say it, sometimes it sounds kind of weird, right? And it gets more confusing. So for me, I want them to know what it sounds like. I'm not really encouraging them to use it because it causes more problems. But they have to know that gonna means going to, and it's not a new word. So these types of exercises will help the students. So looking at words like this, and then tongue twisters. Tongue twisters are great exercises for your students. So for your Korean students and your Japanese students, what sound do they have a problem with? Right, L and R, right? So L and R. So then you find a tongue twister that has an L and R tongue twister that they can listen to you, copy you, and practice. And that's going to help them with the L and the R sound. So you have to know, okay, what does my student have a problem with, and then how can I help them? So tongue twisters are great ideas as well. And then a little bit of business at the end. So there is a lesson plan on page 95 about emails. When your student sends you emails, easy to understand or difficult to understand? Or kind of, you can kind of...
I can read through it.
Right, you can read through it. And again, one of the problems is how they write in first language is not the same how we write an email. For many, many Koreans, and Japanese write pretty well, but Koreans are all over the place. They will send me emails, there's no name. I'm in your class, well, I have 8 classes, which class are you in? So we have to teach them how to write it. How many of you received this from a Korean? This means this in Korean. So they will use different symbols and you're like, what are they talking about? So they also, Samsung is very, very important. It's always in capitals, always. So they don't know when to use capitals, when not to use capitals. They don't know about not using smiley faces. So it's teaching them from the very beginning how to write an email, whether it's a formal email or an informal email. So there's a lesson plan, this is a basic lesson plan, that helps them to write emails. And on page 97, you can use, this is for a complaint, have some form of framework that you can teach it and that they practice it and that they send you an email. Because most of the time when students write, they are writing for themselves, not the audience. And that's the problem, because they don't think, okay, what do they not know, and all of that information. So teaching an email is good for everybody at the very beginning, I would say. And then people who are interested or have people who are interested in business, at the end of the packet on page 103, these are pretty good worksheets that you can use if anybody's interested in business. So this is upper intermediate. They have different 103. They have different worksheets for lower levels. The reason I like it is that it tells you what the aim is. It has all the worksheets created for you, and it's pretty easy to use in the classroom. You don't really have to do a lot of modifying. So it's a good website for easy use. And then the final part, page 107, is people who are doing business. These are top 10 sites for business English teachers. And so you've got lots of different websites that you can use. On page 109 is ESL Library. And so Shelley has given or will give you a password and a link to go to ESL Library. And it's a great resource. And it's not just for business. You can use it for all different levels. It's got flashcards for the low levels for grammar. It's got bio readings. It's got everything. And it's very, very easy to use. I use it all the time for grammar because it's got great worksheets. I use it all the time for my low-level students for reading because it's got lots and lots of biographies, and the biographies aren't just of Americans, they're biographies of everybody. So it's a really, really great resource. So she's going to give you the password and the code that you can go in because you have to pay for this website. The other ones, so breaking news, even though it's in the business section, there are different types of reading that you can also use. ESL Pyland is really good as well. So they're all really good. They've got lots of resources. But if you go in as a tutor and you type in, I don't know, ESL something, there's going to be thousands. So what I try to do is limit to the ones that I use that will be easy for you to use. And so those are the 10 there. And then the last page is page 113. If students don't understand culture, they can't speak, right? Because they don't know what's going on. So here are 101 different types of Americans and American culture. You don't have to agree with it, somebody else did it. But these are good starting points for you to have conversation. So maybe your class with your student is structured and you're going to help them with writing. The first 5 minutes, I might choose 3 of these questions and say, this is what happens in my country, what happens in your country. By having, and you can do this at any level, by having that 5 minutes at the beginning lowers their stress, they feel more comfortable, they're thinking in English. If I go into my class and I just start teaching, they're like, huh? So I have to do something that they're thinking in English. I think my class starts at 1 o'clock. So at 1 o'clock, just before 1 o'clock, they ate lunch or it's their first class. Their brain is somewhere else. I don't know where it is. First 5 minutes of every single class at 1 o'clock, I always start with a short speaking activity so that they're ready for me to deliver the class. Okay? So what I try to show you today in 50 minutes is just what I would be doing, some structure, some lesson plans, some websites that you can do. And then if you have any questions, you can either email me or right now, we've got about perfect time. If you have any questions, right, please feel free to ask.